The autumn wind of 1932 swept through the narrow streets of Cincinnati's over-the-Rhine district, carrying with it the acrid smell of coal smoke and the desperate whispers of a nation in economic collapse. Bread lines stretched around city blocks, and the lucky few who still had jobs clutched them like lifelines in a stormy sea. It was in this atmosphere of desperation that Anna Marie Hahn first appeared at the boarding house on Coleraine Avenue. Her dark hair perfectly coiffed despite the hard times, her smile warm enough to melt the frost forming on the windows. "I'm looking for a room," she told Mrs. Gertrude Klosterman, the boarding house owner, her slight German accent adding an exotic charm to her words. "Something modest. I'm recently widowed, you see." Mrs. Klosterman studied the young woman before her. Anna couldn't have been more than 30, with striking features and an elegance that seemed out of place in these troubled times. Her black dress was well tailored, her gloves spotless, and there was something about her presence that commanded attention. "I'm sorry for your loss, dear," Mrs. Klosterman said, her voice softening. "What happened to your husband?" Anna's eyes glistened with what appeared to be genuine tears. "Tuberculosis. It was difficult to watch him waste away. I nursed him until the very end." She dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Now I find myself alone in this world, trying to make ends meet." The boarding house was filled with similar stories: widows, spinsters, and elderly men who had lost everything in the stock market crash. Mrs. Klosterman had heard them all, but there was something particularly moving about Anna's tale. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself with dignity despite her circumstances, or the genuine warmth in her smile when she spoke to the other residents. "We have a small room on the second floor," Mrs. Klosterman offered. "The rent is reasonable and meals are included." Anna's face lit up with gratitude. "That would be perfect. I can help around the house too. I'm quite good with cooking and caring for people. I learned a lot taking care of my dear husband." Within days of moving in, Anna had become the heart of the boarding house. She prepared hearty soups for the elderly residents, listened to their stories with genuine interest, and offered comfort to those struggling with loneliness and poverty. The men, in particular, seemed drawn to her like moths to a flame. There was Ernst Kohler, a 70-year-old retired baker whose arthritis had forced him to close his shop. He would sit for hours in the common room, telling Anna about the old country and the bakery he had built from nothing. His eyes would light up when she laughed at his stories, and he began saving small portions of his meager pension to buy her little gifts. A flower from the corner vendor, a piece of chocolate when he could afford it. "You remind me of my daughter," he told her one evening as they sat by the fireplace. "She moved to California before the crash. Haven't heard from her in months." Anna placed a gentle hand on his weathered arm. "I'm sure she's thinking of you, Mr. Kohler. These are difficult times for everyone, but you're not alone. You have all of us here." Then there was George Gzelman, a widower in his 60s who had lost his wife to influenza the previous winter. He had been withdrawn and melancholy until Anna arrived, but her presence seemed to breathe new life into him. He began shaving regularly again, pressed his clothes, and even started taking walks around the neighborhood just to have stories to share with her. "Anna, my dear," he said one afternoon as she helped him with his correspondence, "you've brought sunshine back into this old house. I don't know what we did without you." Anna smiled, her fingers briefly touching his as she handed him his pen. "You're too kind, Mr. Gzelman. I'm just happy to help. We all need to look after each other in times like these." But it was Albert Palmer, a 78-year-old retired railroad worker, who seemed most taken with Anna's charms. Palmer had a small but steady pension and had managed to save a modest sum over the years. He was also the most isolated of the residents, having outlived most of his friends and family. "I never thought I'd feel young again," Palmer confided to Anna one evening as she brought him his medication. He suffered from a weak heart and relied on digitalis to manage his condition. "But talking with you, sharing meals, It's like having a family again. Anna's eyes sparkled with what seemed like genuine affection. You're such a sweet man, Mr. Palmer. Any woman would be lucky to have your attention. Palmer blushed like a schoolboy. Do you really think so? I know I'm old, but I still have feelings, you know, still have dreams. Age is just a number, Anna replied, adjusting his pillows with practiced care. What matters is the heart, and yours is as young as anyone's. As the weeks passed, Anna's reputation in the neighborhood grew. She was known as the kind widow who cared for the elderly, the woman who brought comfort to the lonely and forgotten. Local shopkeepers would tip their hats when she passed, and other women would stop her on the street to ask for advice about caring for their own aging relatives. But there were moments, brief and easily missed, when something else flickered behind Anna's warm brown eyes. It happened when she thought no one was looking, a calculating coldness that seemed at odds with her nurturing persona. Mrs. Klosterman noticed it once, when Anna was counting money in her room, the bills spread across her small table like playing cards. The expression on Anna's face was one of hunger, of desperate need that went beyond mere survival. "Everything all right, dear?" Mrs. Klosterman had asked from the doorway. Anna quickly gathered the money, her warm smile instantly returning. "Oh yes, just organizing my late husband's affairs. There are still so many details to sort through." As winter approached and the Depression's grip tightened on Cincinnati, Anna Marie Hahn continued to be a beacon of hope and comfort in the boarding house. The elderly men adored her, the other residents respected her, and the community saw her as a model of resilience and kindness. None of them suspected that behind her caring facade, Anna was carefully studying each of her elderly admirers, noting their habits, their health conditions, their financial situations, and most importantly, their vulnerabilities. She was like a predator disguised as a caregiver, and her prey had no idea they were being hunted. The stage was set for a series of tragedies that would shock Cincinnati to its core, but for now, Anna Marie Hahn was simply the charming widow who had brought light back into the lives of lonely old men. The darkness that lurked beneath her surface remained hidden, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. The bitter cold of January 1933 had settled over Cincinnati like a suffocating blanket, and the boarding house's old radiators struggled to keep the chill at bay. Ernst Kohler's arthritis had worsened considerably, leaving him bedridden most days and dependent on Anna's increasingly frequent visits to his room. "You're an angel, my dear," Kohler wheezed as Anna helped him sit up to take his evening medication. His hands shook as he reached for the small glass of water she offered. "I don't know what I would do without you." Anna's smile was radiant as she smoothed his blankets. "Nonsense, Mr. Kohler. You've been so kind to me since I arrived." "It's the least I can do." She paused, her expression growing concerned. "Though I have to say you don't look well tonight. Perhaps we should call Dr. Morrison." Kohler waved a dismissive hand. "Doctors cost money I don't have. Besides, what can he do for an old man that time hasn't already decided?" "Don't talk like that," Anna chided gently. "You have many good years left, but you do need to take better care of yourself." She reached into her small medical bag, something she'd acquired to help care for the boarding house residents. "I have something that might help with the pain. A tonic my late husband's doctor recommended." She produced a small brown bottle filled with a clear liquid. "Just a few drops in your water. It's quite effective for joint pain and will help you sleep better." Kohler looked at the bottle with interest. "What is it?" "Oh, just a mixture of herbs and minerals. Nothing harmful. I've been taking it myself for my headaches." Anna measured out several drops into his water glass, the liquid dissolving without a trace. "There, drink it all down." Kohler obediently drained the glass, making a slight face at the bitter aftertaste. "It's quite strong. The most effective medicines usually are," Anna replied, taking the empty glass. "Now try to get some rest. I'll check on you in the morning." That night, Ernst Kohler experienced the most peaceful sleep he'd had in months. The constant ache in his joints seemed to fade away, replaced by a warm, floating sensation that made him feel younger than he had in years. He dreamed of his bakery in its heyday, of the smell of fresh bread and the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with his hands. But by morning, Kohler's peaceful sleep had become something far more permanent. Anna discovered the body when she brought his breakfast tray, her scream of shock and grief echoing through the boarding house. Mrs. Klosterman and several other residents rushed to the room to find Anna cradling Kohler's still form, tears streaming down her face. "He was fine last night," Anna sobbed. "We talked for nearly an hour. He seemed tired, but not like this." Dr. Morrison arrived within the hour, a weary man in his 50s who had seen far too much death during the Depression years. He examined Kohler's body with practiced efficiency while Anna hovered nearby, wringing her hands with worry. "Heart failure," Dr. Morrison pronounced after his examination. "Not uncommon for a man his age, especially with his arthritis and the stress of these hard times. The cold weather probably didn't help." "But he seemed to be getting better," Anna protested. "I've been giving him a tonic for his pain, and he said it was helping." Dr. Morrison nodded sympathetically. "Sometimes the heart just gives out, my dear. There's nothing you could have done. In fact, I'm sure your care made his final days much more comfortable." The funeral was a modest affair, attended by the boarding house residents and a few neighbors who had known Kohler from his bakery days. Anna was inconsolable, weeping openly as they lowered the simple pine coffin into the frozen ground. Several mourners commented on how devoted she had been to the old man, how she had brightened his final months. "She's got the heart of a saint," one neighbor whispered to another. "That poor old man was lucky to have someone who cared so much." What none of them knew was that Ernst Kohler had made a significant change to his will just 2 weeks before his death. In a moment of gratitude and affection, he had named Anna Marie Hahn as the beneficiary of his modest life savings, nearly $800, a small fortune during the Depression. Anna learned of her inheritance when Kohler's lawyer, Mr. Benjamin Schwartz, visited the boarding house 3 days after the funeral. She received the news with apparent shock and overwhelming emotion. "I can't accept this," she protested, dabbing at her eyes with her handkerchief. "Mr. Kohler was like a father to me, but this is too much. Surely he has family who should inherit." Mr. Schwartz shook his head. His daughter in California hasn't contacted him in over a year, and he was quite specific about his wishes. He said you had shown him more kindness in a few months than he'd received in years. He wanted you to have this. Anna's hands trembled as she accepted the bank draft. I don't know what to say. This is so unexpected. He also left you this, Mr. Schwartz added, producing a small wooden box. He said it contained some family jewelry that belonged to his late wife. He thought you might appreciate having something to remember him by. That evening, alone in her room, Anna carefully counted the money and examined the jewelry. The pieces were modest but genuine, a gold wedding band, a small diamond brooch, and a pearl necklace that had seen better days. Together with the cash, it represented more money than Anna had seen since arriving in Cincinnati. But instead of the grief and gratitude one might expect from someone who had just lost a dear friend, Anna's face showed something else entirely. There was satisfaction in her expression, a cold calculation as she planned her next moves. The following weekend, Anna took a streetcar to downtown Cincinnati, dressed in her finest clothes and carrying a small purse filled with Ernst Kohler's money. She made her way to Murphy's Gaming House, a dimly lit establishment tucked away in an alley behind the Sinton Hotel. The place was thick with cigarette smoke and the desperate energy of people trying to gamble their way out of poverty. Anna approached the poker table with the confidence of someone who belonged there, her eyes bright with excitement as she placed her first bet. The other players, mostly men who looked like they hadn't seen a good meal in weeks, watched with interest as this well-dressed woman joined their game. "First time here, sweetheart?" asked a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth. Anna smiled sweetly. "Oh no. I've been playing cards since I was a child. My late husband taught me everything he knew." For the next several hours, Anna played with the intensity of an addict getting a fix. She won some hands and lost others, but the thrill of the game seemed to consume her completely. By the time she left Murphy's, she had lost nearly half of Ernst Kohler's inheritance. But her eyes still glowed with the fever of someone who had tasted something intoxicating. Back at the boarding house, Anna resumed her role as the caring widow, tending to the other elderly residents with the same apparent devotion she had shown Kohler. But now there was a new urgency to her attention, particularly toward George Gzelman and Albert Palmer. She began spending more time with each of them, learning about their finances, their health conditions, and their family situations. She listened with rapt attention as Palmer told her about his railroad pension and the small nest egg he had managed to save. She showed deep concern when Gzelman mentioned that his late wife's jewelry was still locked away in a safety deposit box downtown. "You shouldn't keep such valuable things locked away," Anna told Gzelman one evening as she helped him with his dinner. "Life is so uncertain these days. You should enjoy the beautiful things while you can." Gzelman nodded thoughtfully. "You're right, my dear. Perhaps I should bring some of those pieces home. My wife would have wanted them to bring joy to someone." Anna's smile was warm and encouraging, but behind her eyes, the calculating coldness was growing stronger. Ernst Kohler had been just the beginning, a test run to see if her plan would work, now that she knew how easy it was to gain the trust and affection of lonely old men, how simple it was to be named in their wills, and how readily their deaths would be attributed to natural causes. Anna-Marie Hahn was ready to expand her operation. The money from the gambling house was calling to her, promising excitement and the chance for a big score that could change her life forever. All she needed was more capital to fund her addiction, and the boarding house was full of potential investors who would never live to see their returns. The predator had tasted blood, and now she was hungry for more. Spring arrived in Cincinnati with unusual warmth, and the boarding house residents seemed to emerge from their winter hibernation with renewed energy. Anna had used the months since Ernst Kohler's death to carefully cultivate her relationships with the remaining elderly men, particularly George Gzelman and Albert Palmer. Her reputation as a devoted caregiver had only grown stronger, and she had become indispensable to the daily operations of the boarding house. "Anna, dear, could you help me with something?" George Gzelman asked one sunny April morning as she brought him his breakfast. At 64, Gzelman was younger than her previous victim, but his recent bout with pneumonia had left him weakened and increasingly dependent on her care. "Of course, Mr. Gzelman. What do you need?" Gzelman pulled out a small key from his vest pocket. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding my late wife's jewelry. I went to the bank yesterday and retrieved some pieces from the safety deposit box." He gestured to a small wooden jewelry box on his dresser. "I thought perhaps you might help me decide which pieces to keep here and which to return to storage." Anna's pulse quickened, but her expression remained one of gentle concern. "I'd be honored to help, but are you sure you trust me with such precious things? My dear girl, you've shown me more kindness than my own children have in years. If I can't trust you, who can I trust?" As Anna carefully examined each piece, a gold pocket watch that had belonged to Gzelman's father, his wife's diamond engagement ring, several gold chains, and a collection of silver coins, she mentally calculated their value. Together, they represented several $1,000s, enough to fund months of gambling. "These are beautiful," Anna said softly, holding up the engagement ring to catch the morning light. Your wife had exquisite taste. Zellman's eyes misted over. She was the most beautiful woman in Cincinnati when I married her. I worked double shifts at the factory for 3 years to afford that ring. She must have loved you very much, Anna replied, her voice filled with sympathy. It's clear these pieces mean the world to you. They do, but what good are they doing locked away in a vault? Zellman sighed. I have no children to pass them on to, and my nephews back east haven't written in years. Sometimes I think it would be better if these treasures went to someone who would appreciate them. Anna carefully placed the ring back in its velvet-lined box. Don't talk like that, Mr. Zellman. You have many good years ahead of you. But if you ever did want to ensure these pieces went to someone special, you could always update your will. The seed was planted, and over the following weeks, Anna nurtured it carefully. She began preparing special meals for Zellman, claiming they would help him regain his strength after his illness. She spent hours listening to his stories about his late wife, offering comfort and companionship that he had been missing since his wife's death. Meanwhile, her attention to Albert Palmer intensified as well. The 78-year-old had grown increasingly frail over the winter, and his heart condition required daily medication. Anna had gradually taken over the responsibility of managing his pills, claiming it would ensure he never missed a dose. You're too good to me, Anna, Palmer said one evening as she brought him his medication and a cup of warm milk. I keep thinking I should do something to show my appreciation. Your friendship is appreciation enough, Anna replied, though her eyes lingered on the small strongbox Palmer kept under his bed. She knew it contained his life savings, nearly $1,500 in cash and bonds. No, that's not enough, Palmer insisted. You've given me a reason to keep living. Before you came here, I was just waiting to die. Now I look forward to each day. Anna's hand rested gently on his shoulder. You're such a dear man. Any woman would be lucky to have someone who cares as deeply as you do. Palmer's weathered face flushed with pleasure. Do you really mean that? Sometimes I wonder if I'm just a foolish old man, thinking someone as lovely as you could care about me. Age doesn't matter when it comes to matters of the heart, Anna said softly. What matters is kindness, generosity, and the ability to make someone feel special. You have all of those qualities. That night, Palmer lay awake thinking about Anna's words. The next morning, he asked Mrs. Klosterman for the name of a good lawyer. Anna's gambling had become more frequent and more desperate. She now visited Murphy's gaming house 3 times a week, sometimes staying until dawn. The money from Ernst Kohler's inheritance was long gone, and she had begun selling small items from her room to fund her addiction. The thrill of the cards and dice had become as necessary to her as breathing, but her luck had been poor lately, and she was accumulating debts to some very dangerous people. You owe us $200, sweetheart, growled Mickey Torino, a thick-set man who managed collections for the gaming house. Mr. Murphy's been patient, but his patience has limits. Anna's hands trembled as she counted out the few bills in her purse. I can give you 50 now, and I'll have the rest by next week. I'm expecting some money from a family matter. Torino's smile was cold. Family matter, huh? Well, for your sake, I hope your family comes through. Mr. Murphy doesn't like to be kept waiting, and neither do the people he works with. The threat was clear, and Anna knew she was running out of time. She needed money quickly, and her elderly admirers represented her only viable source of income. That weekend, George Zellman fell ill with what appeared to be a severe case of food poisoning. Anna was naturally the first to discover his distress and immediately took charge of his care. I don't understand it, Zellman moaned as Anna helped him back to bed after another bout of violent nausea. I haven't eaten anything unusual. These things happen sometimes, Anna said soothingly, preparing a glass of water with what she claimed was a stomach-settling powder. The important thing is to stay hydrated and get plenty of rest. Dr. Morrison was called. But by the time he arrived, Gzelman's condition had deteriorated rapidly. The doctor found him unconscious, his breathing shallow and his pulse weak. "It looks like severe gastroenteritis," Dr. Morrison told Anna as they stood outside Gzelman's room. "At his age, and with his recent pneumonia, his system may not be strong enough to fight it off." Anna wrung her hands with apparent distress. "Is there anything we can do? I've been giving him fluids and trying to keep him comfortable, but he just keeps getting worse." "You're doing everything right," the doctor assured her. "Sometimes these things just have to run their course. Keep him comfortable and call me if there are any changes." George Gzelman died that night, with Anna holding his hand and whispering words of comfort. His death was attributed to complications from gastroenteritis, exacerbated by his weakened condition from the previous winter's pneumonia. The funeral was even more modest than Kohler's had been, but Anna's grief appeared just as genuine. She wept openly as they lowered Gzelman's coffin into the ground, and several mourners commented on how devoted she had been during his final illness. 3 days later, Mr. Schwartz returned to the boarding house with news that surprised no one who had witnessed Anna's dedication to the deceased. "Mr. Gzelman updated his will just 2 weeks ago," the lawyer informed Anna. "He's left you his personal effects, including his late wife's jewelry collection, and a sum of $1,200 from his savings account." Anna's shock appeared genuine. I had no idea. He never mentioned anything about changing his will. He said you had shown him what it meant to have family again," Mr. Schwartz explained. "He wanted to ensure you were taken care of." That evening, Anna carefully inventoried her new inheritance. The jewelry alone was worth more than $3,000, and combined with the cash, it represented the largest windfall she had ever received. But instead of feeling satisfied, she felt only the familiar hunger for more. The next night, she returned to Murphy's gaming house with renewed confidence and a purse full of money. She played with reckless abandon, winning big early in the evening before losing it all and more as the night wore on. By dawn, she had gambled away nearly half of Gzelman's inheritance, but the rush of the game had been intoxicating. As she walked home through the empty streets of Cincinnati, Anna's mind was already turning to Albert Palmer. The old man's health was declining, and his devotion to her had reached the point where he would do anything she asked. She had noticed him looking at her with an expression that went beyond mere friendship, and she knew it was time to capitalize on his feelings. The web she had been weaving was tightening around her remaining victims, but Anna was too intoxicated by her success and her addiction to notice that she was also becoming trapped in her own creation. Each death brought more attention, more questions, and more risk. But the gambling fever had taken hold of her completely, and she was no longer capable of rational thought when it came to feeding her addiction. Albert Palmer would be next, and after him there would need to be others. Anna Marie Hahn had discovered that death was the most profitable business in Depression-era Cincinnati, and she had no intention of retiring anytime soon. The summer of 1933 brought oppressive heat to Cincinnati, and the boarding house's old walls seemed to trap the humidity like a greenhouse. Albert Palmer's condition had worsened considerably since George Gzelman's death, and he had become almost entirely dependent on Anna for his daily care. His heart medication required precise timing, and Anna had convinced both Palmer and Dr. Morrison that she was the most qualified person to manage his complex medical needs. "I don't know what I would do without you, my dear," Palmer wheezed, as Anna helped him sit up to take his evening pills. His hands shook with palsy, and his breathing was labored, even with minimal exertion. "You've become everything to me." Anna's smile was radiant as she measured out his digitalis and handed him the small glass of water. "You're such a sweet man, Mr. Palmer. Taking care of you isn't a burden, it's a privilege." Palmer's roomy eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Anna, I need to tell you something important. I've made arrangements. Legal arrangements. I want you to know that when I'm gone, you'll be taken care of." "Don't talk like that," Anna chided gently, though her pulse quickened with anticipation. "You're going to be around for many more years. No, my dear, I can feel my time coming, Palmer insisted, but I want to die, knowing that someone as good and kind as you will benefit from the little I've managed to save. I've changed my will. Everything I have will go to you. Anna's eyes widened with apparent shock. Mr. Palmer, I can't accept such generosity. You barely know me. I know your heart, Palmer replied firmly. I know how you've cared for me, for Mr. Kohler, for poor George. You're an angel, Anna, and angels should be rewarded. That night, Anna lay awake calculating Palmer's worth. She knew he had at least $1,500 in cash and bonds, plus a small collection of railroad memorabilia that might have value to collectors. Combined with what remained of Zellman's inheritance, it would give her enough capital for the biggest gambling spree of her life. But Anna's addiction had grown beyond her ability to control it. The money from her previous victims had disappeared into the gaming houses faster than she could have imagined, and she now owed substantial debts to several dangerous creditors. Mickey Torino had been replaced by even more threatening collectors, men who made it clear that Anna's charm and beauty would not protect her if she failed to pay what she owed. "You're into us for 800 now," growled Vincent Caruso, a scarred man who worked for the city's most ruthless loan sharks. "Mr. Benedetto wants his money by Friday, or we start collecting in other ways." Anna's hands trembled as she counted out what little cash she had left. "I can give you 100 now, and I'll have the rest very soon. I'm expecting a substantial inheritance." Caruso's laugh was cold and humorless. "Another inheritance? You seem to have a lot of people dying around you, lady. That's either very good luck or very bad luck, depending on how you look at it." The threat was unmistakable, and Anna knew she was running out of time. Palmer's death could no longer be delayed, but she also knew that another sudden death at the boarding house might attract unwanted attention. She would need to be more careful this time, more subtle in her approach. Anna began by gradually increasing Palmer's digitalis dosage, claiming that Dr. Morrison had recommended the adjustment to better manage his worsening heart condition. The old man trusted her completely and never questioned her medical decisions. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding your will," Anna mentioned one evening as she prepared his medication. "It's very generous, but I hope you've also considered your family. Don't you have any relatives who might need your help?" Palmer shook his head sadly. "My brother died in the war, and his children moved to California years ago. They never write, never visit. You're the only family I have now, Anna. Well, if you're certain about your decision, perhaps you should also consider what you'd like done with your personal effects," Anna suggested carefully. "Some of your railroad items might be valuable to collectors." Palmer's face lit up with interest. "You think so? I have some old lanterns and a conductor's watch that belonged to my father. I never thought they might be worth anything." "Oh, they could be quite valuable to the right person," Anna assured him. "Perhaps we should have them appraised. You might be surprised by what they're worth." Over the following days, Anna helped Palmer organize his possessions, carefully cataloging everything of potential value. She also began documenting his daily routine, his medications, and his health complaints, creating a detailed record that would support the narrative of a man in declining health. But Anna's careful planning was complicated by an unexpected development. Mrs. Klosterman had begun to notice patterns that troubled her. 3 elderly men had died in her boarding house within 6 months, all of them under Anna's care, and all of them had left their money to the young widow. "It's probably just coincidence," Mrs. Klosterman confided to her sister during their weekly telephone call. "But it does seem strange. Anna's been wonderful with all of them, but I can't help wondering." Wondering what? Her sister prompted. Well, she's been going out a lot lately, dressed up and carrying money, and I've heard some of the other residents talking about seeing her in places that aren't exactly respectable for a grieving widow. Mrs. Closterman's suspicions were further aroused when she noticed Anna counting large sums of money in her room, far more than a widow living on charity should possess. She also observed that Anna's behavior had become more erratic. She was often absent during the day, sometimes returning home in the early morning hours, looking disheveled and agitated. Meanwhile, Anna's gambling had reached a fever pitch. She was now visiting multiple gaming houses throughout Cincinnati, sometimes playing for 18 hours straight. Her luck had been terrible, and she was losing money faster than she could acquire it. The pressure from her creditors was mounting, and she knew that Palmer's death could no longer be delayed. On a sweltering night in late July, Anna made her final move. She prepared Palmer's evening medication with special care, adding a substantial dose of a substance she had acquired from a disreputable pharmacist who asked no questions about her purchases. "This should help you sleep better," Anna said as she handed Palmer his pills and water. "Doctor, Morrison suggested we try a stronger dose to help with your heart palpitations." Palmer took the medication without question, trusting Anna completely. Within an hour, he was experiencing severe chest pains and difficulty breathing. Anna waited exactly 30 minutes before calling for help, ensuring that any intervention would come too late. "Something's wrong with Mr. Palmer," Anna screamed, her voice echoing through the boarding house. "I think he's having a heart attack." Mrs. Closterman and several other residents rushed to Palmer's room to find Anna performing what appeared to be desperate attempts at resuscitation. Palmer was unconscious, his breathing shallow and irregular. Dr. Morrison arrived within 20 minutes, but Albert Palmer was already beyond help. The doctor's examination revealed all the signs of massive heart failure, exactly what one would expect from a man of Palmer's age and condition. "I'm sorry, Anna." "Doctor," Morrison said gently as he covered Palmer's body with a sheet. "There was nothing you could have done. His heart was simply too weak to continue." Anna's grief appeared overwhelming. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably as Mrs. Closterman tried to comfort her. "He was like a father to me," Anna wept. "I can't believe he's gone." But even as Anna mourned publicly, privately she was calculating her next moves. Palmer's death would bring her the largest inheritance yet, enough to pay off her debts and fund the gambling spree that would finally make her rich. She was already planning her return to the gaming houses, already imagining the thrill of placing bets with money that no one would ever miss. What Anna didn't know was that Mrs. Closterman had finally decided to act on her suspicions. The boarding house owner had quietly contacted a friend who worked for the Cincinnati Police Department, sharing her concerns about the unusual number of deaths and Anna's suspicious behavior. Detective Ray Wilson was a 20-year veteran of the force who had seen every kind of crime the city had to offer. When Mrs. Closterman approached him with her story, his instincts told him that her suspicions might be justified. 3 deaths in 6 months, all elderly men, all leaving money to the same woman, Wilson mused, as he reviewed the information Mrs. Closterman had provided. And this Anna Hahn has been seen gambling with large amounts of cash. It's worth looking into. Wilson began his investigation quietly, reviewing the death certificates and interviewing the doctors who had treated the deceased men. He also started surveillance of Anna's activities, documenting her frequent visits to gaming houses and her increasingly erratic behavior. As Albert Palmer was laid to rest in Cincinnati's Spring Grove Cemetery, Anna Marie Hahn stood graveside with tears streaming down her face, playing the role of the grieving surrogate daughter to perfection. The other mourners whispered about her devotion and kindness, about how lucky the old man had been to have someone who cared so much. But Detective Wilson was also at the cemetery, watching from a distance and taking notes. The net was beginning to close around Anna Marie Hahn. though she remained blissfully unaware that her carefully constructed facade was starting to crumble. The final gamble of her deadly career was about to begin, and this time the stakes would be her own life. August 1933 brought with it a heatwave that seemed to mirror the intensity of Detective Ray Wilson's investigation. Anna Marie Hahn had inherited Albert Palmer's entire estate, nearly $2,000 in cash and bonds, plus his collection of railroad memorabilia, but her celebration was short-lived. The gambling fever that had driven her to murder was now consuming her inheritance faster than she had ever imagined possible. "You're on a losing streak like I've never seen," commented Jake Murphy, the owner of Murphy's Gaming House, as Anna lost her 5th consecutive hand of poker. "Maybe you should take a break, sweetheart. Come back when your luck changes." But Anna couldn't stop. The thrill of the game had become more important than winning or losing, and she was now gambling with the desperation of someone who knew she was running out of options. In just 2 weeks, she had lost over half of Palmer's inheritance, and her debts to various creditors continued to mount. "One more hand," Anna insisted, her eyes bright with fever. "I can feel my luck turning." More, what Anna couldn't feel was Detective Wilson's investigation closing in around her. The detective had spent weeks quietly gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and building a case that was becoming more damning by the day. Wilson's first breakthrough came when he interviewed Dr. Morrison about the 3 deaths. While the doctor maintained that all 3 men had died of natural causes, he admitted that the timing was unusual. "In 25 years of practice, I've never seen 3 residents of the same boarding house die within 6 months, Dr. Morrison told Wilson. Individually, each death made perfect sense given their ages and health conditions. But taken together, it does seem coincidental. Wilson's second breakthrough came from the pharmacist who had been supplying Anna with various substances. Under pressure from police questioning, the man admitted that Anna had purchased several compounds that could be lethal in large doses. She said she was caring for elderly patients and needed things for pain relief and sleep aids, the pharmacist explained nervously. "I didn't ask too many questions. Times are hard, and I needed the business." But Wilson's most significant discovery came when he began investigating Anna's background. What he found was a woman whose entire identity was built on lies and deception. Anna Marie Hahn was not the grieving widow she claimed to be. She was actually Anna Marie Filzer, a German immigrant who had arrived in Cincinnati just months before her first appearance at the boarding house. Her supposed late husband had never existed, and her entire story about nursing him through tuberculosis was a fabrication designed to gain sympathy and trust. "She's a complete fraud," Wilson told his partner, Detective Frank Murphy. "Everything about her is a lie, from her name to her background. And now we have 3 dead men and a woman who's been gambling away their money." Wilson decided it was time to confront Anna directly, but when he arrived at the boarding house, he discovered that she had disappeared. Mrs. Klosterman was frantic with worry. "She left 3 days ago and hasn't been back," Mrs. Klosterman explained. "She said she was going to visit a sick friend, but she took all her belongings with her. I think she's gone for good." Wilson immediately put out an alert for Anna's arrest, but she had vanished into the criminal underworld of Cincinnati. For 2 weeks, there was no trace of her, and Wilson began to fear that she had fled the city entirely. But Anna hadn't left Cincinnati. She was hiding in a rundown hotel in the city's worst neighborhood, using the last of Palmer's money to fund one final desperate gambling binge. She knew the police were looking for her. She had seen Wilson watching the boarding house and had recognized the signs of an investigation closing in. "I need to win big," Anna muttered to herself as she prepared for what she knew would be her last night of gambling. "One big score, and I can disappear forever." Anna made her way to the Riverside Club, the most exclusive and dangerous gambling establishment in Cincinnati. This was where the city's high-stakes players came to risk fortunes on a single hand of cards. and Anna knew it was her only chance to win enough money to escape her pursuers. The Riverside Club was a world away from the shabby gaming houses Anna usually frequented. The players were well-dressed businessmen and criminals who bet with the casual indifference of people who had more money than they knew what to do with. Anna felt out of place among them, but her desperation drove her forward. "Table stakes are 500 minimum," the dealer informed her as she approached the main poker table. "You sure you want to play with the big boys, lady?" Anna placed Palmer's railroad watch and several pieces of Zellman's jewelry on the table. "These are worth at least 1,000. I'm good for it." The game began, and for the first time in weeks, Anna's luck seemed to turn. She won the first 3 hands, doubling her stake and feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that had become her addiction. But as the night wore on, her luck began to change. "Raise you 2,000, said Vincent Torino, one of the loan sharks Anna owed money to. He had been watching her play with growing interest, and Anna realized with horror that she had walked into a trap. I don't have 2,000, Anna stammered, her confidence evaporating. Torino's smile was predatory. "Then I guess you're out of the game, sweetheart. But don't worry, we'll work something out." Anna tried to leave, but found her way blocked by 2 large men who worked for Torino. She was trapped, surrounded by criminals who knew she owed them money and had no way to pay. "Please," Anna begged. "I just need a little more time. I can get the money." "From who?" Torino asked mockingly. "You've already killed all your sugar daddies. Word is the cops are looking for you too. Seems like you're all out of options." It was then that Detective Wilson and a team of police officers burst through the doors of the Riverside Club. Wilson had been tracking Anna through her creditors, knowing that her gambling addiction would eventually lead her to the city's most notorious gaming establishments. "Anna Marie Hahn, you're under arrest for the murders of Ernst Kohler, George Zellman, and Albert Palmer," Wilson announced as officers surrounded her. Anna's facade finally cracked completely. The charming, caring widow disappeared, replaced by a desperate woman who knew her game was over. "You can't prove anything," Anna snarled, her German accent becoming more pronounced under stress. "Those men died of natural causes. I cared for them." "We'll let a jury decide that," Wilson replied as he placed handcuffs on her wrists. "We've got witnesses, we've got evidence of your purchases from the pharmacy, and we've got your gambling debts as motive." As Anna was led away from the Riverside Club, the other gamblers watched in stunned silence. The woman who had seemed so charming and innocent was revealed to be a cold-blooded killer who had murdered 3 elderly men to fund her addiction. The trial of Anna Marie Hahn became a sensation in Cincinnati and across the nation. Newspapers dubbed her the Blonde Borgia and the Gambling Widow, and crowds gathered outside the courthouse every day to catch a glimpse of the woman who had shocked the country with her crimes. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They presented evidence of Anna's false identity, her gambling addiction, her debts to dangerous creditors, and most damning of all, the poison she had purchased and used to kill her victims. Witness after witness testified about Anna's behavior, her sudden wealth after each death, and her frequent visits to gambling establishments. Anna's defense attorney tried to portray her as a victim of circumstances, a woman driven to desperation by poverty and the harsh realities of the Depression. But the evidence against her was too strong, and her own behavior during the trial, alternating between tears and cold indifference, only reinforced the prosecution's portrayal of her as a calculating killer. On November 6, 1933, after deliberating for less than 4 hours, the jury found Anna Marie Hahn guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Albert Palmer. The judge sentenced her to death in the electric chair, making her the first woman to receive such a sentence in Ohio's history. "You have shown no remorse for your crimes," the judge told Anna as he pronounced sentence. "You preyed upon the loneliness and vulnerability of elderly men, betraying their trust in the most heinous way possible. Justice demands that you pay the ultimate price for your actions. Anna's appeals were exhausted by late 1938, and on December 7th of that year, she was executed in the electric chair at the Ohio Penitentiary. She was 32 years old and maintained her innocence until the end, claiming that she was the victim of a conspiracy by the gambling establishments that wanted to silence her. But the evidence spoke for itself. Anna Marie Hahn had murdered at least 3 elderly men, possibly more, to fund her gambling addiction. She had exploited their loneliness and trust, presenting herself as a caring angel while slowly poisoning them to death. The boarding house on Coleraine Avenue was eventually torn down, but the memory of Anna Marie Hahn's crimes lingered in Cincinnati for decades. Her case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of gambling addiction and the vulnerability of elderly people to those who would exploit their need for companionship. In the end, Anna had learned the hardest lesson of all. In the game of life and death, the house always wins, and those who try to cheat the system inevitably pay the ultimate price. Her final gamble had cost her everything, including her life, proving that some bets are simply too dangerous to make. The charming widow who had once brought comfort to lonely old men was revealed to be nothing more than a predator in disguise, and her execution marked the end of one of the most shocking crime sprees in American history. Anna Marie Hahn had played her last hand, and this time, justice held all